Non c'erano il boiler, in bagno non si poteva usare, ho dovuto sistemare.
Nadia Rossi used to work in a restaurant catering to the masses of tourists that descend into Venice. When they disappeared because of COVID-19, her job did too.
Con il Covid siamo tornati punto e da capo, per cui sono andata a finire in mezzo a una strada a luglio, perché non avevo più possibilità di pagare l'affitto. Sono stata
Listen, this
ospitata.
is an inclusive space for Italians. This is an inclusive space for the Italianos, all right? Hey, get in here. Hey, Italians, get in here. We're watching a movie in Venice.
Da una persona e nel frattempo poi ho trovato questa sistemazione.
Rossi's old rent was about $1,700 a month. Now she receives only around $250 in unemployment. That money goes to supporting her 2 kids and to fix up this old apartment. The heating still doesn't work.
Quindi ho dovuto prendere questo, la lavatrice. Un problema di gas, io l'ho messo in sicurezza. Poi ho recuperato ovviamente queste cose.
Most people who rent apartments don't pay for these kinds of fixes. But Rossi isn't renting. She's occupying an abandoned home, one of the thousands some estimate to exist in Venice.
How did you decide to occupy this house?
Io ho 36 anni, ho sempre lavorato, mi do da fare, mi impegno. Per carità, la necessità a volte ti porta a fare anche delle cose illegali come questa. Io sono arrivata a Venezia per studiare con una valigia piena di sogni, aspettative, per fare tutt'altro tipo di vita, non per fare l'occupante.
The cost of housing in Venice is an old story. As the city becomes a Disneyland for tourists, landlords turn apartments into Airbnbs, rents skyrocket, and locals leave. But the city is also sitting on a resource that could go a long way to fix this. Activists say that the government has let 2,000 public housing apartments fall into disrepair rather than allocate them.
This is an abandoned convent. The sisters transform it in a whole...
Anybody care to guess why? Not knowing anything about Italians' way of funding their local government. Why do you think a city would let their public housing stock go into disrepair? Especially if there is a little bit flooding. Especially when you're looking at who tends to own these units. If the money, how this usually works, okay, US shit, I only know US. Checking my notes, okay, the United States federal government, or in this case, Department of Housing and Urban Development, puts money directly into a state's housing authority that then is dispersed even further to the county, region, or municipal level. So then municipalities get the money for the housing that gives them the control over development, location, right? So on and so forth. So basically, the money is given to a city by the federal government to make all of those decisions, right? So the city ostensibly owns the land and the property. And then after that, maybe there will be an extensive grant program offered by the federal government to continue to put money into the building for maintenance, but not usually, right? The city then is responsible to issue bonds on the building or to use some sort of other funding mechanism for leverage to generate enough income to be able to put money back into their public housing stock, right? So what happens is that, let's say in the case with the United States local government, they have a plot of land that is owned by the government, got it? But let's say that you're in a really booming city. Prices are going up all around you. Cost of land is going up. Real estate's out of control. Real estate's fucking out of control, all right? Absolutely skyrocketing. Like San Francisco or like just like California style real estate. All right? The government has a limited budget. They have limited operating expenses. They might not be able to afford. They might not be able to afford to pay for the costs without imposing an additional taxes, raising taxes. And so I would say that Venice probably has really, really expensive. It's been around for a fucking minute. I would say that the cost of living in Venice isn't cheap, maybe. So it's very likely that putting any kind of money into existing housing stock is incredibly, incredibly expensive. And it's in the interest of the government, the local government, to allow for disrepair instead of putting in the maintenance and then ultimately waiting until the 50-year lease is up on the public housing building to then sell the building onto the private market, because then that will generate revenue. Once the cost of land skyrockets, right, and you have interested buyers on the private market who are willing to pay a pretty penny for it, then they, the city, just found a way to increase their own revenues that can then be used for their expenditures, right? That fund their private, not their private, but sometimes fund their private public partnership projects for infrastructure, things like that. Sorry, I'm just like really into reading about municipal governments right now, chat. Radical Maniac, thank you so much for the raid. Hi, readers. How are you doing? I'm just over here talking my fucking chat's ears off. Did the raid work? I don't know what I'm doing. You made it. Thank you, Radical. How are you doing? Hi, if you're meeting me for the first time, if you came in through the raid, Poli-Sci Guy. My name is Amy C3. We're right now kind of just chit-chatting. We're watching this video from Vice about how COVID has exposed the Venice, Italy's housing crisis. Teslac to the moon. Poli-Sci Guy. Me? Maybe. I might be a Poli-Sci Guy. Vice is kind of sus. Thank you, Radical Maniac. Everyone also follow Radical Maniac. I'll need to check you out myself.
Really?
Okay, back to it.
Why did they turn it into a hotel?
In questa città purtroppo si è trasformato la casa in una fonte, in una rendita, ed è quello che umanamente non può essere.
But the
Okay,
city
Chad, I hate whenever I do this, but okay.
is also sitting on a resource that could go a long way to fix this. Activists say that the government has let 2,000 public housing apartments fall into disrepair rather than allocate them.
This is an abandoned convent. The sisters transform it in a hotel.
Really? Why did they turn it into a hotel?
In questa città purtroppo si è trasformato la casa in una fonte, in una rendita, ed è quello che umanamente non può essere.
Nicolo Sardi is one of the housing activists who aren't just lobbying the government. They're actively tracking down abandoned homes and seizing them.
How can you tell when a building is abandoned?
Allora, questa è una delle
Lord,
porte
thank you for the
blindate
follow.
che l'ente ATER, che gestisce le case pubbliche in questa città, mette alle porte delle case sfitte per evitare che qualcuno entri e lo occupi.
How long has this place been blocked off and abandoned?
Allora,
So,
questa
Like
casa
literally same shit here in the States. City-owned property that are abandoned because they're in a state of decay or disrepair are closed off, keeping occupiers out. Right? Because it's A, too expensive to fix them up, and B, they would rather block off the building than allow for squatters to have temporary shelter than to allow them to shelter in place during COVID-19. How long does it take for a locality to take control of a property that has back taxes or abandoned? Usually the county records or like municipal records are somewhere on file. So like, you know if you are a county or a city official who owns the deed on the property. I mean, again, I'm making an assumption here based on the way that property works here in the United States. Like all of those records are in a county's assessor's office for the most part. Like 10 years?
è abbandonata da circa 10 anni. Fino a 8 anni fa non c'era nemmeno quella porta di ferro. Probabilmente ha messo quella porta per evitare le occupazioni. Ma qual è il reato? È peggio un'occupazione o è peggio lasciare vuota una casa? Anche quello è un reato legalizzato. E noi dobbiamo lottare contro quel reato legalizzato.
The housing crisis here is unique in that it's affecting the middle class. Usardi is able to help people who wouldn't normally qualify for assistance and who can actually invest in their new homes.
Noi occupiamo case sfitte e abbandonate da 3, 4, 5 anni in modo tale che nessuno possa dirci che noi portiamo via le case a chi ne ha diritto. Per cui noi facciamo un'opera antidegrado in questa città.
Do you think the government cares more about Venetians or tourism?
Il governo si preoccupa
My
dei
friend worked
turisti,
for
al
assessor,
punto
but
tale
then they
che
found
sta già
out he took
pensando a
bribes.
come ripartire dopo il Covid.
He took bribes.
L'esperienza del Covid non ha insegnato nulla. Questa città andrebbe ripensata a misura di residente, altrimenti è destinata a morire e a diventare un parco tematico ad ingresso.
A city reliant on one industry is ill-equipped to deal with its social problems. And activists say Venice could have solved its public housing crisis if it made it a priority.
It's remarkable to see abandoned social housing like this after speaking to people who have lost their jobs because of COVID, who have had to squat in abandoned houses, who are struggling to pay rent, because it's clear that there are actually apartments for people. And instead, as you can see, the government has let apartments like this fall into complete disrepair.
Venice's government knows these properties are out there, but blames Rome for making its job harder, with too many regulations controlling how public housing is assigned and too few for limiting tourist accommodation.
A lungo andare i fenomeni che stiamo vivendo possono solamente peggiorare. Da questo punto di vista, per quello è importante che Roma riconosca non solo a parole la specialità veneziana, ma anche dando quei poteri che altre città europee stanno utilizzando. Se non c'era un punto di equilibrio e un tetto massimo o di giorni o di appartamenti o di percentuali, non si poteva riuscire a dare una risposta ai giovani che volevano stare a vivere nelle città.
It sounds like you understand the solutions. You make it sound like your hands are kind of tied by Rome and the amount of money they're giving you and the legislation there, but you're in charge of that. So what can you do and what are you doing?
Stiamo investendo una cifra come 20 milioni di euro in questi 2 anni per ristrutturare completamente il patrimonio pubblico del Comune di Venezia, delle case che sono oggi vuote perché da anni non vengono manutenute per i costi importanti che hanno. Le stiamo sistemando e le stiamo assegnando alla gente con delle procedure che alle volte sono complesse perché si appoggiano a normative regionali. Tutti i veneziani dicono di volere. Tutto quello che i veneziani vogliono è provare a riportare la città anche a misura di residente. Su questo è ovvio che il Comune è ovviamente dalla loro parte, è impegnato molto su questo. Quello che purtroppo manca è la possibilità di farlo in alcuni casi.
Everyone here relies on tourism, but then there's also too much tourism. Where is the balance?
È tutto sbilanciato e infatti questo Covid è stata la dimostrazione. Tutte quelle attività, tutti quei B&B, tutti quegli hotel nati così, sono tutti morti adesso. Non va bene così, perché la città è buttata in pasto ai cani affamati. Si sfrutta come sfruttano le prostitute per avere soldi in cambio e basta. La fregatura è sempre dietro l'angolo, sempre.
Questo è un conto abitanti elettronico che abbiamo posizionato qui nel 2008 e da allora contiamo settimanalmente il numero degli abitanti di Venezia. È da 12 anni che lo contiamo e va sempre più giù. Quando lo abbiamo posizionato, il numero era 60.704 abitanti. Adesso siamo a 51.336.
Oh shit.
Why do you think you have to fight so hard for Venice?
Venice is a city
51,000
going
people?
down every day, and the business doesn't care about
Houses?
the culture. The business is only money. So I have to protect the Venetian culture and population from the business.
Why are all the young people leaving Venice?
For the young generations, there's no chance to live in Venice. There's no way to have a house at the good price. And so, for example, when a young guy want to start a family, they decide to leave Venice and go to the mainland.
As a Venetian, why is it so important to you to save Venice?
Now we are a Disneyland. But in the next future, Venice could be a city like Pompeii, like Machu Picchu. So very nice cities, very nice marbles, monuments, but without the real life, the inhabitants.
My state was having that problem too. A lot of young people are leaving because there's nothing here anymore. Maine.